Okay, I just want to welcome Matthew onto the stage. He is an ex-Marine, significant amount of experience in the U.S. Marines, in the U.S. Navy. We initially brought him on to speak about what had happened with the major resignations today. We're going to still speak about that, but we've just got some possible breaking news. It's unverified, but there's a possibility that the war has restarted in a kinetic manner. Matthew, if this has started, what's your initial reactions?
If it has started, you go back to the childhood rhyme or idiom we were taught, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And that would be, what you would expect here. The Iranians were betrayed twice in 1 year during negotiations. So why shouldn't they be betrayed a third time? Right. And so that's my initial gut. I know other people have been saying that something like this, Trump indefinitely prolonging the ceasefire could mean a bunch of different things. One of them meaning he's setting the Iranians up for betraying them during the ceasefire. But we'll see. We'll see. I hope, I think like everyone does, that these reports are inaccurate. But, as you're seeing, more and more sources are chiming in, saying that these attacks are happening not just in Tehran, but what I saw here on my phone across the country. And this would, as I just said, fit the MO of the Trump administration.
I want to ask you specifically about, I'm getting that as well. It says explosions reported across Iran tonight: Tehran, Qom, Shahriya, Karaj, Isfahan, Chitga. It seems like a simultaneous coordinated strike campaign hitting multiple cities. So this is a lot more bigger than we thought. It seems like the ground, obviously the war has restarted. So from a military perspective, obviously everyone I speak to, you all said this doesn't make sense. But hypothetically, from not taking it from the non-logical sense, but why would he restart at this specific point?
Exactly. I mean, we're putting our mind, we're trying to get into the mind of a crazy person here, and I wish we weren't, I wish we were just being glib, right? But we're not. He thinks Donald Trump thinks this is the best way forward. If these attacks are what's occurring, if there was this song and dance about negotiations, I think this gets back to what a lot of us were assuming. The purpose of the ceasefire was to give the American military a couple weeks to rest, to refit, to rotate in new forces, to resupply, and to prepare for this next phase. And there were some reports over the last couple of weeks that the Americans were preparing for a large, intensive campaign against Iran if the negotiations failed. So we'll see how long this is going to last. Is it just going to be, we can't imagine it's only being one night of attacks. It's certainly coming off of failed negotiations, put those in quotes, because I don't know how many of us believe the Americans were sincere at all in those negotiations. Certainly the way that J.D. Vance showed up and just embarrassed himself in Islamabad by being unable to answer any questions, having to constantly to phone back home to get the answers, shows just how insincere the Americans were about all this. So we'll have to see what occurs in the sense of, is this going to be a campaign that's meant to last for months? Is this going to be another short campaign meant to try and put more pressure on the Iranians to agree to some form of settlement? Or is this setting up a larger, broader war that would involve seizing Iranian territory, seizing Iranian islands, bits of the coastline, key strategic infrastructure? Is that what this is about? But we have to wait to see to find that out.
And so one of the pieces of information I've just seen is that the launch occurred from Kuwait. So one of the launches, which didn't happen previously in the war, was a direct launch of a missile from Kuwait to Iran. What would be the reason for that? What is the reason for the change of tactics? Because if you can explain that, please.
Well, they have done that. They have fired missiles from the ground from both Kuwait and from the Emiratis. Those locations have been confirmed. I'm not sure if anything was ever fired from Bahrain or Qatar. But certainly you have what are called the precision strike missiles, PRSM. You'll see the acronym. This is the replacement for the ATACMS, the Army Tactical something combat munition. But the ATACMS are attackers and prisons are both shot out of, people have seen those containers on the back of trucks with 6 or 8 different launch tubes on those. That's what the prism is. That's what the ATACMS is. These are what are called standoff precision missiles, ground launched. So they're able to be fired from a range at which the Iranians can't conduct what was called effective counter battery. Counter battery is when you're able to fire back at the enemy that's firing at you with their artillery. Now, certainly the Iranians' capabilities with their missiles and drones, they could find these things. But the ATACMS, it's just another. The ATACMS and the precision strike missiles, the prisms, they're just another tool in the toolkit. There's nothing special about it. It's just another way for the Americans to strike the Iranians, just as if they use missiles from planes. This is the same type of system, but launched from the ground. There's really not a lot to look into it in that way as to why this would be any different than previous strikes. And we'll have to see what the targets they're going after. Donald Trump for weeks now has been promising brutal collective punishment against the Iranian people. And so we'll have to see whether or not these missiles were launched against civilian targets or if they were launched against military targets.
There's also, all of this is your expertise, but one of the things that we've been waiting for, or I've been waiting for, is the USS George Bush. Apparently that USS George Bush was 3 days away. And so I assumed that they were going to wait for the George Bush, and hence why possibly the strike would be on the weekend. Why would the strike have started before the George Bush got to its location?
It's possible we don't have the correct location of the Bush. You may be there already. I doubt that. You have a lot of what are called ship watchers out there and people who see these things kind of hard to miss. Giant aircraft carriers sailing past your coastline. But they were ready for this. And a lot of times you see this deliberate misinformation, right? I mean, this idea of we're going to put forward. We're going to put forward this notion that we're waiting until the Bush shows up, and then you attack a few days ahead of time. Hopefully you've caught the Iranians off guard. The other thing about this too is maybe they were waiting for the Bush to show up, Suleiman, but something showed up that caused them to do it now. Could be just Trump's temperament. Could be just that Trump said, do it now. He got upset about something, do it now, right? But the other side of it could be that just like the way we understand that this war was begun early because the Americans and Israelis became convinced they were going to be able to strike Ayatollah Khamenei and kill him. They launched supposedly the war at the end of February, a few days early at least, in order to take advantage of Ayatollah's vulnerability. So maybe something like that happened here. Maybe the supreme leader, the current supreme leader was identified. Maybe it's a way that some of the other leadership was seen, or maybe it's just a target of opportunity that they felt this is the right thing to get.
Well, you said something really important there, actually, because the next breaking news links to what you're saying. The claim, obviously, we can never trust the Israelis, but that being said, Israeli channels are denying the IDF involvement in the strikes on Iran tonight. They claim this is solely a U.S. Air Force strike. What's your thoughts on that?
That's interesting that the Americans would do this. We have been under the impression that the Americans are the ones who are trying to impose restraint on the Israelis. And we've been under the impression that the Israelis are the ones who really don't want this ceasefire. Although at this point, the Israelis, I think, are comfortable with the ceasefire because I feel that they have gotten what they were looking for in terms of Lebanon. Right. So So they're okay with the ceasefire at this point. But that is interesting if the Israelis did not take part for the United States to carry out something like this unilaterally, because you have seen throughout this campaign very close coordination between the Americans and the Israelis. And when the Israelis would do something that the Americans didn't know of, the Americans expressed how upset they were publicly about it. So that's interesting to me, and we'll see if that's the case. But the IDF, what does that say to you, Suleiman? If the IDF right now is saying out loud, we're not part of this, guys, what does that mean to you? I mean, this is really something to take in, that the IDF is saying this violence is not something we're involved with. That's really quite a statement coming from the IDF.
True. Although, I mean, I doubt it, but it could be in a way for Trump to kind of realign, because he knows. If you look at some of his tweets that he's been relaying recently, he's been saying Israel doesn't control me, Israel's a great partner. He's been trying to convince everyone.
Right.
But maybe this could be where. But who knows? Who knows what's going on here? So coming back to it, obviously there's not any more breaking news, but if there is, we'll shift and ask you the question. But earlier on today, about an hour ago, we had a major resignation of the U.S. Navy Secretary Phelan. And there were multiple reports. The initial report was he resigned. Then there were reports that he got fired. There were some reports saying he refused to carry out orders. Others were saying that Hegseth was just getting jealous of him because he was taking more of more power. Other reports were saying that actually he was just directly giving orders and ignoring whatever Hegseth told him. You explained that you have an immense amount of experience. You have you worked with him, right? If you want to explain to the audience what your background is, and then we can answer that question.
Yeah, I didn't work with John Phelan, but I did work for the Secretary of Navy, going back to 2002, 2004. I was a junior Marine Corps officer on the Secretary of Navy's personal staff. So I have some insight into how things work in the Pentagon, the relationships between the Secretary of Defense and the service secretaries, so the Secretary of Navy, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Air Force. But, we have seen, Salim, in the last several weeks, the White House cleaning house. I mean, assuming this is the White House Chief of Staff trying to get some order, some degree of decorum, if you want to call it that, among the cabinet. And so you've seen a number of people getting thrown out of this administration. The Homeland Security Secretary, the Attorney General, the Labor Secretary was just forced to resign yesterday. Of course, there are all types of reasons for those, but we've also seen a lot of turmoil within the Pentagon with Pete Hegseth's leadership and his firing of, I think it's 13 senior admirals and generals in the last year, essentially, most especially the Chief of Staff of the Army, Randy George, the most senior officer in the U.S. Army. Randy George was forced to resign. You had the director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Kacher. He resigned, or he was moved out of his position just 2 days before this war began. So a large number of these types of firings, resignations, some of them for no reasons that we can understand other than the person's color of their skin or their gender, as well as the speculation on you're firing the Chief of Staff of the Army as you're going to war. The director of the Joint Staff is being reassigned 2 days before the war. And now you've got the Secretary of the Navy resigning in the midst of the largest naval operations the United States has carried out since the Second World War. The Secretary of the Navy is departing now. Does that make sense to anyone? We know through media reports that there has been conflict between the Secretary of Navy, John Phelan, or the departed Secretary of Navy, John Phelan, and Pete Hegseth. A lot of personality clashes there. I think simply Phelan doesn't respect Hegseth, and I think we can all understand why. So this may not have been an issue of the Secretary of Navy saying to the Secretary of Defense, this operation, this campaign, this war, I'm not going along with it. At the same time, too, it's real coincidence that this happens an hour before what we may be witnessing, a resumption of the American war on Iran, breaking a ceasefire, basically betraying and double-crossing again the Iranians. But is this the Secretary of Navy saying, this is too much? I can't serve in a capacity like this with such dishonor. And now I think a lot of people out there would say he should have resigned the first day he was there. But, is this gotten to the point where someone even like him says this is too much for me? So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can look into this. But I think what you see, no matter how we want to speculate about it or try and figure out what may have happened, the truth is that, this is a rotting ship. This is a corrupt right? This is a corrupt institution. This is an institution that is failing on multiple levels, whether that be whether that be morally, ethically, operationally. The Pentagon is disaster.
This is just shocking, but obviously we'll continue to give you the information. Again, all of this is unverified. I just want to be clear on this in terms of the attacks. But obviously we'll give you more information as we receive it. One of the main reasons I brought you in was because of the blockade as well. obviously, again, this is part of expertise. One of the things, how has America been able to administer the blockade? Because it's like we're hearing reports that they basically jumped on 2 vessels. One came from Iran to the United States of America, the other, sorry, to China, and the other one was coming from China to Iran. The first vessel apparently had like sodium petrochloride in there. The second one apparently was taking oil from what you call again, Iran to China. That being said, we looked into it. There's about 20 or 30 vessels that have been allowed to get through the strait despite the blockade. Many of those vessels are going to China, India, Malaysia, various other places. Some of the vessels are actually sanctioned sanctioned Iranian vessels. So what is going on? Like, we thought there was a blockade, but is there really a blockade?
It's a stunt by the American government. It's meant to give Donald Trump some type of narrative to push. It's a blockade. It's a very porous one, as you're saying. Dozens of ships have gotten through it. The Financial Times totaled up 34 ships at least that have gotten through it, and those are the ones that actually show up on the ship trackers. How many others have gotten through because they've turned off their transponders and aren't being tracked? We don't know. The other side of it, the Americans, as you were saying, some have seized 2 ships. One of those ships that they seized was 400 miles southeast of Sri Lanka. So not even in the area we're talking about, not in the Arabian Sea, didn't just pass recently through the Straits of Hormuz. So, and we saw the American Navy do this with Venezuelan ships. They seized ships that were either coming to or going to Venezuela in the Indian Ocean as well. What you have in the Indian Ocean, and people may see this in the photos, you've got this weird looking American ship. And it's a ship that the Americans took. They've got 2 of these, I believe. And they took a tanker ship. And on top of the tanker ship, they built a landing pad, a very large landing deck. And what they do is they position commandos on that ship. And it's basically a special operations ship, and it's able to do this type of stuff. And this ship is just essentially sitting in the middle of the Indian Ocean, waiting for an Iranian ship to show up, a Venezuelan ship to show up, whoever shows up that the Pentagon is trying to capture. These commandos are based on this, funny looking repurposed oil tanker in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And that's the one that caught the second ship, again, 400 miles southeast of Sri Lanka. But, you look at that then, and you look at the numbers of ships that are getting through, the fact that we've only seen 1 ship really get stopped in that area, in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea area. And you realize that this blockade is all just for show. It's all a stunt. It's all meant essentially for propaganda and public relations, public information warfare type purposes. One of the things I was going to talk about tonight, and this completely upended, was that what you had going into this, until 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, you had a status quo that I think all 3 powers could have lived by. I think the Israelis have gotten out of this war what they're happy with the their conquest of southern Lebanon. The Iranians have control of the Straits of Hormuz and certainly the tolls that they can administer there. And Donald Trump has enough grist for his rhetoric, for his narrative, for his Truth Social posts to make the claim that he defeated Iran, that he's the only one who was ever willing to stand up to the mullahs in Tehran, and he did so. And so coming into this tonight, my belief was that there, and still is, because this is just the actions of Donald Trump, what we're seeing here, particularly too, if the Israelis didn't take part, this, I think, also leads to this idea that the Israelis were happy enough with where they were in this war that essentially a modus vivendi could have been established. And just essentially each side had gotten enough of what it wanted. Each side could make the case to their publics, to their constituencies, that they had done enough, or they had won, or that they were victorious. But of course, with Donald Trump, nothing is ever straightforward. Nothing's ever simple. And the most important thing for Donald Trump is his own ego. Yeah.
No doubt. And I've got some more questions for you. There is some more breaking news. It is, and there's just contradictory information. So one report is saying that there are no explosions in Iran, and it was merely Iran testing their air defense systems. On the other hand, contradictory reports are still claiming that there is explosions. Just so we're aware. So it could be just Iran testing the air defense, but then it doesn't make sense about the report about Kuwait. But then that could just be someone exaggerating. But just so the audience know and they're aware about what's happening. Sorry. So there is a possible. But just on that air defense, would it be throughout the country? Would the air defense give the impression of missile attacks at the same level?
If they fired off the air defense missiles all around the country at the same time, it certainly would. Would they do that? I don't know. Why would they do it that way? If they are testing air defense systems, why would they do it across the whole country at the same time at night? That doesn't sound right to me. Maybe they did. I don't know. But we're gonna, one of the great dictums of war is that first reports are often wrong. So we have to see, certainly, as I was saying, I believe that all sides could take something from the status from where we're at today and claim victory with it. And then if they get negotiations in the future, that's possible. But until the next crisis arises, I could see the political leadership among the Iranians, the Americans, and the Israelis settling for where they're at now, without coming to any finality or any type of agreement or any type of resolution, just continuing to kick that can down the road. But also, I wish that we had some, a president that we would say, no, they wouldn't do this. They would stick to what the plan is, but we don't have that. So,
and that's the complexity of the situation, right? Because we've got such a president, and just everything's up in the air. So it is a possibility that could have happened something today. And that goes against what he himself would normally do as well. And so we're not able to ascertain what's going on. Now coming back to the blockade, so you've explained how it's difficult to basically create a blockade based on the way you've explained it. But what can the US do? And what I mean by that is with the next warship coming, the USS George Bush, what would be the reason for it? Would it be for the blockade, or do you think it would be actually for kinetic warfare?
Well, I think she would have carried out strikes against Iran. That's one of the purposes of it, but also too, the blockade will be a mission that she would take part in. The aircraft carrier itself would not be involved in enforcing the blockade, other than providing fighter support as an air patrol over the region. One of the issues you have here, Salim, and why it's so difficult for the American Navy, and the American Navy has about 50 or 60 surface combatants as well as submarines in the region. Dozens of destroyers, the aircraft carriers, support ships, et cetera, as well as submarines. But one of the problems is that the American Navy can only get so close to the Iranian coastline because of Iran's drones, their missiles, their anti-ship missiles, especially. And so that means that you're looking at the American warships being hundreds of miles away from the mouth of the Straits of Hormuz. Right. So once the Iranian ships get past that mouth, the American warships are so spread out for the Americans to then go and interdict those ships. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of distance that has to be covered. They can't get too close to the Iranian coastline. And so by the time that the Iranian ships are in a position where the Americans can safely interdict them, they're thousands of miles at sea already. And so you get one, and maybe your information is not correct. Maybe this is not a ship that came. Maybe this is the wrong ship. This type of information is wrong all the time. Intelligence is incredibly inaccurate. And so, you have that difficulty as well. And so you also have the reality that the American fleet has been operating at a very high tempo for a prolonged period here, for weeks upon weeks. The ships need maintenance. The ships need to go all the way to Diego Garcia to get their missiles restocked. They can get their fuel, they can get their food and stuff while they're underway. But to get those missiles replaced, these people see the vertical launch system is what it's called, the missiles that shoot straight up out of the deck of the ship. They have to go all the way to Diego Garcia to get those put back in. They can't go back to the Mediterranean because they can't pass the Houthis in Yemen in the Red Sea. And they certainly can't go to Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain because they can't get through the Straits of Hormuz. So they have to travel 2,000 miles to Diego Garcia to get reloaded with missiles. So you've also got an American fleet that's spread thin because of getting, because of maintenance, because of getting refueled, because of getting resupplied, et cetera.
So another question I've got for you is this. I've been quite critical of this, of Iran agreeing to the ceasefire. I felt like it wasn't a great decision.
Mhm.
Now, one component of the blockade is this, that you basically have a scenario where, as you mentioned, the vessels that are basically the destroyers that are taking part in this are able to get closer to Tehran. For example, the Abraham Lincoln initially was only 300 kilometers away, had to retreat to 1,100 kilometers. And so if there wasn't a ceasefire, would it be more of a risk to be that close because they could hit them with the missiles and the drones? And what would add to the complexities of a blockade where Iran could hit your vessels via missiles, via drones, via anti-ship ballistic missiles, and various other things?
So let's step back even further and look at what were the three objectives that Iran said they wanted to achieve with this war. How are they going to establish deterrence, right? How are they going to get sanctions lifted? How are they going to reassert their sovereignty here? One was they're going to use economic warfare, and they did that quite well. Two, they were going to put political stress on America and its allies, not just regional allies, but European allies and Pacific allies as well. They did that. The Iranians did that very well as well. The third thing the Iranians said they wanted to do was to inflict casualties on the Americans. And when they mean casualties, they mean deaths. And the Iranians said, we would like to get 500 dead Americans. And so far, they've only gotten 13. But they believe that that 500 number is what's needed in order to cause domestic political problems for the U.S., make it so that the deaths were so high that doing a war like this in the future, the Americans wouldn't be able to do for domestic political reasons. And so, okay, now you look and keep that in mind because, again, the Iranians have two of the three objectives. If you put those ships up close, right, and you're in range of the Iranian drones and missiles, you're walking right into what the Iranians want you to do. So what the Iranians would do, this is what I would advise them to do. I'm sure they don't need my advice. They obviously don't need my advice, that's for sure. But they would set ambushes. And that's something the Americans have to consider, is that maybe these ships would be a trap. Maybe a ship would be an ambush, and it's set up in such a way to allow when the American destroyer gets close to it, that there's a ambush set where the ship is able to communicate back to the drone and missile forces. They're aware of what's going on, and they're more able accurately to hit the American destroyer that's now close to the Iranian ship. The same thing, too, for American aircraft. We saw the effectiveness of Iranian air defenses after they shot down, after the Iranians shot down that F-15, and then whatever happened with the rescue mission of the pilot, and whether or not that was also a uranium heist going on too. But we saw that the Americans took a number of aircraft losses. We've seen that the Americans and the Israelis have lost close to 50 drones, whether they be Reapers or Hermes or what have you. So the Iranians can shoot down American aircraft. So that'd be another thing to be concerned about. If you're bringing in Marines now on helicopters onto a ship, what's to stop the Iranians? What's to stop the Iranians from stepping out on the deck of that ship with shoulder-launched anti-air missiles and shooting down those helicopters? So you have these scenarios that certainly the Iranians are thinking about in order to try and get those casualties against the Americans, and how spectacular that would be, for the Iranians to do such a thing, to sink an American destroyer or to shoot down 3 American helicopters that were trying to board an Iranian cargo ship. So the Americans have to be careful that they don't fall into that type of ambush. They don't fall into that trap. So that's one more thing that makes this blockade very difficult.
No doubt, no doubt. Now, another, so that's why the blockade is different. Now, another question I got for you is, how long can they maintain this blockade? And I know this is less from a military perspective. I asked Laurie Johnson the same question, but basically, you've got a blockade in. The impact it's going to have on the financial sector is going to be innumerable.
Right.
And so I guess the question mark becomes, how long can they keep this blockade in? Or could they create and it sounds like they can't, so I guess, but just if you can explain it, if they could create some kind of semi-system where they kind of have a blockade where they only go after certain vessels, which seems like what it's got now. I don't know. It's like really confusing. What's your thoughts on what's going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, the key thing for the blockade is one, it does nothing to open up shipping from the other states. This is only going after Iranian shipping. It doesn't do anything to stop Iran stopping other shipping from going through the Gulf. So as long as Iran has the straits closed, this blockade is meaningless in terms of world economics. But I shouldn't say meaningless. But again, this idea that the Americans have to keep so far away from the Iranian coastline, their ships are already spread thin because of a host of issues, right? Oh, they're overextended. They need to be resupplied. They need to go to maintenance, et cetera. So it makes it very difficult for the American ships to get Iranian ships. So what damage are you actually doing to the Iranians? What impact are you actually having? If we take the Financial Times number that 34 Iranian ships got through the American blockade and the Americans have seized 2, well, it's quite possible that the Iranians are just putting pen on paper here and saying, look, we're still doing significantly better. We can do this for months. We can do this for years. If the ratio is going to be essentially 17-1, for every ship we get through, one and gets caught by the Americans. And that's only that 34 number of ships is only the ships that went through with their transponders on. So we don't know the real number of Iranian ships that have gotten through, but let's just say it's 34. Well, if the Iranians are looking at it on paper, they're saying, that 17-1 ratio, that's sustainable for us, as well as the fact that we're getting these tolls from these other ships coming through. So we've got, JP Morgan calculated a week or two ago that this is going to bring in $70-90 billion annually for the Iranians. That's about 25%, I think, of their GDP. Yeah. So, I mean, the Iranians, if they want to lose 1, 2, 3, 4 ships a week, that works out for them in the end. So, the math doesn't work here in terms of the impact that this is going to have on the Iranians. What's going to happen is at some point, Donald Trump is going to have a real conversation with Scott Bessent and Susie Wiles. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, both on the impacts of this economically for the U.S. And everyone must remember that before this war started at the end of February, the United States was not in good shape economically. All the indicators were all trending downwards. The jobs were down. Manufacturing was not growing. Inflation was coming up. So before the war, the United States was in poor or shaky economic health. So at some point, he's going to have this conversation with his economic people as well as his political people about the impact of this. Mr. President, if we go back up to 7 or 8% inflation, which is what everyone is saying is going to happen if this thing goes on, we're going to get crushed in the midterms, and whoever your successor is going to lose in 28. That's the conversation that's going to happen, as well as Donald Trump is going to get calls from his friends who are losing billions or even trillions of dollars. The impact on this, just take, for example, the impact on the Gulf states, how this is impacting, affecting them. So much, and Donald Trump brags about this, so much of America's growth right now comes from foreign investment. This is what Donald Trump himself is saying. I think his numbers are grossly exaggerated, but there's truth to that. If the bulk of the growth of the United States is coming from artificial intelligence, data centers, technology companies, and then you go and you look and you see where a substantial portion of that investment comes from the Gulf states. So if that's pulled out, you now have this issue of not just inflation in the U.S., but also you have a downturn. Right, you have an American economy where the floor is falling out of it. So, that's what's going to really predicate things here for the Americans. That will be, I think, the ultimate decision that Donald Trump will have to be. That'll be the ultimate factor Donald Trump will have to make a decision on.
One last question before we let you go, and we really appreciate it. We're definitely going to get you back on again for a longer segment. Is you mentioned Scott Bessent. This guy is very smart financially, economically. He helped George Soros essentially destroy the pound. And so this guy should know what's going on. And what I mean by that is the economic damage this is causing to America's allies, possibly to the US in the long term, on various other things. So why is this decision being made? It makes, like, from a financial economic perspective, it just makes no sense. And the fault can't just solely be blamed on Trump when he has these type of experts there who are possibly guiding him, or in some cases misguiding him.
Yeah, you wonder this. I mean, there's this when Bassett and Lutnick came into office. There's a lot of the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. There's a lot of speculation that these guys ultimately want to devalue the dollar. That the debt is their major concern, and the way they want to go about tackling America's debt is to devalue the dollar. The other thing as well, too, with that, making America a manufacturing country again, a country that actually makes things again. Is this, it's some crazy way to go about devaluing the dollar? Because that's where it all heads to. You head to right. You head to flight from the dollar by other countries. You head to a de-dollarization process. You lose the petrodollar. I mean, is that the way that this happens? Is that the way that they, right? I mean, that's absolutely insane. But I think the more logical thing is that Bassett is a loyalist. None of these people in the cabinet were chosen for anything other than their loyalty. Certainly, Bassett's a billionaire. He, as you said, he knows what he's doing in many ways. But we have a president that is going to do what he wants, and we're seeing enough coverage coming out of the American media that even if you don't trust the Times, you don't trust the Journal, you think that they're trying to establish narratives for other interests, whatever. There's enough of an overlap in what they're saying to really understand that this president is someone who doesn't want to hear bad news, who you can't contradict, who, if you do that, you will be shut out of the room. Go ask Tulsi Gabbard about that, right? I mean, that's the reality of this president and the way he makes decisions and the information coming into him. And so I think maybe that's the case here, is you have Bassett just going along with it because he knows that's what's best for him personally.
Matthew, thank you so much for coming. I want to apologize because I was looking left, looking right.
Oh, no, you're good.
Looking everywhere. I feel so bad because it was
you're good. I hope I was helpful.
You were so helpful, and thanks for being so fluid and my hectic nature of figuring out what's going on. I really appreciate you. I really value it. Thank you so much for being so accommodating.
Well, thank you for having me on. And yeah, and this is why they call it the news, right?
Exactly, exactly. We are the #1 place for news as well on X. So appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking your time out.
Okay, you have a good night. Thank you.
You too as well. Thank you so much. That was Matthew. Make sure you give him a follow. I'm gonna put his Twitter on the nest. I forgot to ask him to plug it. I do like to get people to plug their things because appreciate it. But make sure you like this video. Make sure you comment on it. Make sure you share it and let everyone know about it. I really, really appreciate him. Like, comment, and share. The only place you get real news and real information. We were giving you it live as it was happening, and then as it was confirmed to not be true. Like, comment, and share. Subscribe. Okay.